1 meter above the sea level. So in we are like any other island nations, Maldives is facing severe challenges of climate change. Some of the islands, most of the islands, in fact, it is the highest point in the Maldives. It is 1 meter above the sea level. So it's a huge challenge in the Maldives. Also, I would like to reiterate that given that the nature of the islands or Maldives as a whole, or specifically the other smaller islands as well, these island states, or 6, it usually produces, for instance, less than 2.5% of the harmful gases to the atmosphere, which means the contribution to the global warming or sea level rise as a result is very much insignificant. So that is where I believe larger nations needs to come forward, as my colleague here just now mentioned, with appropriate funding. Rightly, you have mentioned at the beginning, it's at the moment it is 28 billion it is raised for climate funding, but the need is not basically 300 billion, it's in trillions of dollars. So that's where the funding is required for smaller island nations to mitigate the climate changes that the smaller island nations and similar nations are facing.
That just even for climate justice, the financial aspects of supporting adaptation has to be increased, and the increment is not only in billions, but like you said, like my colleague who spoke before me said, it has to be in trillions of dollars. And countries like Nepal, we already have our national adaptation plans. We have devoted 45% of our small country to the landscape is all under forest. It's heavily forested. We have preserved our land, but that doesn't ensure that we don't have climate-induced disasters. Just at the last of last monsoon, which is in September, we had 3 days of incessant rain. We lost livelihood, lives, infrastructure, crops. It totaled almost 45 billion Nepalese rupees, which is, I can't say, I'm very bad at converting money, but it's a lot of money for a country like Nepal. We are very committed to our NAPA plans, the National Adaptation Plans, but we need something like $45.9 billion in external assistance. And as you know, the environment right now is not right for raising that kind of money from the traditional donors. So what do we do? So this is why I think this conversation is at a very good point, because we need to reach out and look at more options for funding projects like this, for programs like this, and maybe reaching out to the private sector. Debt, like nature and nature swaps for conservation, and nature and debt swaps, green bonds, blended finance could be some of the ways out. But I have to tell you frankly, Nepal as a traditional country has not really thought through the processes of how we are going to initiate this. So conversations like this will surely help us in raising that kind of money. But even the consciousness and the conscience of the countries who have been responsible for increasing the global temperatures should think very seriously, because that doesn't really only affect island states or the glaciers melting in countries like mine. It affects the whole world. Where will we go if planet Earth dies? Where will we go if the temperature really rises to more than 2 degrees? These are very, very serious questions that we should look at. And it's not only funds that we need. We also need data. We need to know when the clouds are going to burst. We need to know when the storms are coming. We need to know when there is going to be no water. And we also need technologies. We in the morning session and in the sessions yesterday, we heard a lot about AI. So is it only going to benefit the aggrandization of the rich economies? Or is AI also going to look at how issues such as drought, such as managing pollution, going to be will AI be adapted or trained towards these issues? Is it going to look at how diseases are migrating? So we have lots of issues that we need to look head on and tackle. Also infrastructure that we have lost. For Nepal, it's very, very expensive to build infrastructure and we don't have that much resources. But the minute we build it, we haven't really even used it and it's gone. So how can we climate-proof infrastructure? Who's going to look at insurance, climate insurance risks? So these are many questions that need to be answered. And I'm glad I'm in this platform because these are questions I don't have answers to, but I think collectively these are things that we can all talk to and come up with. And I think in the next questions we are also going to look at some Marshall Plan issues. So my other participants will also be talking to that. And thank you.
In the Himalayas, although we have a lot of conservation efforts which are enshrined in our constitution, yet the climate effects are not sparing Bhutan either. Therefore, the question that is brought in front of me is, do we need a climate marshal? If so, who should lead it? On this, I must quote, or I must say that whatever we plan or we come up with should be based on climate justice. The climate justice that is very clearly emphasized by none other than Honorable Prime Minister of India, Sri Narendra Modi ji. There should be obvious recognition for countries which are carbon neutral or carbon negative. Bhutan is a net carbon negative country, yet the effect of climate change affects Bhutan in a big way. Therefore, what we need is, apart from my colleagues just spoke about the funding part, funding part on the climate mitigation. Along with that, what we need is the political will to implement it as it comes. Unless we have that will to implement the mitigation efforts, we will not be able to bring changes in the climate effects. If we talk of Bhutan as a country, the climate adaptation program, if Bhutan only has to implement it, we need over 14 billion US dollars. For a country like Bhutan, which has just graduated from its LDC category, this is a big amount. Therefore, we need to collaborate, we need to have funds, and we need to have political will for the implementation of it. Now on the climate marshal, leadership is another one that I'd like to talk about here. Unless we have a coalition of countries, similar countries, we will not be able to again mitigate the climate change. What Bhutan has spearheaded very recently is, that was just in the last COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, we initiated a coalition of carbon neutral and carbon negative countries. A coalition among Bhutan, Madagascar, Panama and Suriname. That is called Z0. Now this is a coalition of carbon neutral and carbon negative countries. Now if we can have this sort of mini-lateralism among the multilateralism, we will be able to have a say in the world, and our voice will be heard by them. If Bhutan only raises the issue of climate change and climate mitigation, our voice gets lost in between. It loses its importance. So, to be able to heard outside, what we need to do is maybe make this sort of mini-lateral coalition of small countries, like-minded states, which are affected equally by climate change.